Well, good morning, everyone. I want to make sure that I welcome you to this Clergy Roundtable. My name is Eileen Hayes. I am the Executive Director of Michigan Faith in Action. And for those of you who don't know who Michigan Faith in Action is, we are a statewide social justice organization, and we look to bring people to their voices and help them impact policy change that impacts their lives. So we have been around for several years. Many of you may know us in our original iteration when we were Flint area congregations together. And we did that for the Flint area. We had a name change when we began expanding our work throughout the state. We've worked on several issues that make us proud, and some of them make it very appropriate that the governor is here to speak with us, because some of those things are in process as we speak. There are things that are on her desk that she may sign that we help to work on. So I welcome all of you here, and I'm going to pass it over to Luke Allen, who will facilitate. He is our lead organizer for the state. Luke?
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to keep my part real brief because we have a limited time with the governor, and we're really grateful for the time we do have. I will just say a few things for logistics very quickly. I would ask you, if you're not speaking, to keep yourself muted so that this doesn't get too confusing. I would also mention very briefly that we are a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit. And it's important to emphasize we're very grateful that the governor is here. We would also be doing this if she was a Republican, right? So regardless of who our governor is, we want to have a relationship with them. We think it's important because we have some values and some issues that we want to see addressed. Finally, I know many of you, most of you probably, and Eileen knows many of you as well, but you don't all know each other. And I know we have folks here from everywhere from the UP down to Monroe to Grand Rapids and everywhere in between. And I would ask you, if you can, to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, title, and the name of your congregation, and possibly the town or city where you're located. So that way we can see who's all here. We're going to talk about next steps after we speak with the governor, and we'll do more then. But right now we're very lucky that the governor has agreed to go right into some questions. And our first question is going to come from Father Tom Halford. Father Halford is the pastor of St. Rita's Catholic Church in Clark Lake, Michigan. So Father Halford, go ahead.
Thank you, Luke. Good morning, Governor, and all you other pastors. God bless you and your work, Governor, and everything you're juggling. Thanks for keeping us safe. I just want to ask about healthcare in general, and will there be increased testing for coronavirus? And who should be tested? I've wondered a number of times if I should just present myself for safety's sake in terms of working with my congregation to be tested.
Well, thank you for the questions. I appreciate it. And I'm awfully glad to be here with all of you. I am incredibly grateful for the leadership that you are providing in communities all across our state. This has certainly been a highly stressful time for so many people. And I think about the important work that you do to help people in their challenging times, and how hard that is when we can't be together. And you've been nimble and you've done what you needed to do to protect your members, but I know it cannot be easy. And I just want you to know I'm incredibly grateful for your leadership and partnership and finding alternative methods of ministry while helping to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. I appreciate the nature of the question. 6 months ago, when we were seeing such community spread and such great loss of life, and the trajectory was really scary, we didn't have enough testing materials. We didn't have enough information or support. We had to build a lot of things here in state. We're now doing about 30,000 tests a day, which makes us a national leader. And because of that, we've got better information and in terms of keeping people safe and doing the tracing that's so important. We know that it's going to be incredibly important that we continue to do testing. And I would encourage anyone who is tending to different groups of people and if you are concerned, to avail yourself of a test. They're in every community, and they're relatively easy to come by these days, because it's important that you have knowledge. Knowledge is how we keep one another safe. We're advocating, Dr. Janae Caldoun and our great medical minds at the University of Michigan School of Public Health, along with the CDC and most scientists in the space, are advocating that anyone who has been around someone who's tested positive with COVID, who thinks they've been around someone who's tested positive for COVID, who's staying on the front lines, should definitely go and get a test. My daughter is at the University of Michigan. She got a notice that a number of kids in her dorm tested positive. She went and got one and got her results the next day. Unfortunately, she was negative, but she's taken it very seriously in terms of the protocols. And so I believe, just as we're building the apparatus for the dissemination of vaccines when they become available, we have built this up so it makes it easier for people to get a test. And we encourage you to get one if you think you fall into any of these categories, or you're not feeling well, to get that test, so that you know if you are COVID positive, and you can take the appropriate action to keep from it spreading and to keep yourself safe.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Reverend Dr. James Perkins. Reverend Perkins is pastor of Greater Christ Baptist Church in Detroit.
Good afternoon, Governor, and to all of you who are a part of this call. Governor, in 2016, there were several thousand votes in Detroit that were not counted for whatever the reason, and if they had been counted, then it might have made a difference in the outcome of the election. What precautions is the state taking to make certain that all votes are counted in Detroit and throughout the state?
Yeah, Reverend, thank you for the question. I think it's a really important one. One of the things that we did in 2018 was amend our Constitution to make it easier for people to vote from home. We did not know we would be in the midst of a global pandemic in our next presidential election. But thank goodness that we did that. We took that action to make it easier. We are anticipating historic turnout for this election. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson is a nationally recognized expert, and so we couldn't ask for a better person to be overseeing our statewide election in this cycle. But we also know that there are efforts to undermine the election, whether it is through the post office, or questioning the integrity of mail-in voting, or it is in potential intimidation efforts around Election Day. And all of these are concerning for a lot of different reasons. So we're taking action. We're working very closely with the Attorney General and the Secretary of State. Now, in Detroit specifically, the Secretary of State is working very closely with Clerk Winfrey. They are supplementing a lot of the work that she is doing. She needs a lot of poll workers. I don't know how many she still is looking for, but often our poll workers are retirees who are contributing and doing something to help the election, and people who may not feel comfortable being a poll worker right now because of COVID-19 and how uniquely vulnerable older Americans are. And so that remains something that we are working to try to ensure she's got enough people to work the polls on Election Day. But the Secretary of State's working very closely. She feels confident about the processes that they've put in place. This primary was a good opportunity for them to really ascertain what kind of numbers of people we're going to see come into the polls and how it's going to work. And so I have confidence in Jocelyn Benson's work and supplementing what's happening with Janice Winfrey. Another thing that is a tool that is available to us this cycle that we never had before is the ability to go in early and vote. And that's something we're hoping that a lot of people avail themselves of. I went into my clerk's office here in Lansing and voted on the first day that was available. It's been open for a couple of weeks now. And the more people that can do that, the better. Because the last thing we want is to be inundated with a lot of people together on November 3rd, which, with COVID and with some of the intentional chaos that could ensue. We want to make sure that every vote is cast safely and every vote is counted. And so these are two pieces to getting that right. And so to the extent that you can encourage your parishioners, your members to get that vote in now, it's really important. They can go into their clerk, they can drop off their absentee ballot at their clerk's office. They can go in and register to vote and vote at the same time for the first time. So the more people that do that early, the better for all of our safety and for our ability to get a good count as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Governor. And I should emphasize, we had a meeting with much like this with Secretary of State Benson, went really well, and we plan to maintain that relationship and hopefully work together to ensure democracy continues to work for everybody here in Michigan. Our next question comes from Reverend Dr. Ann Hebear. Reverend Hebear is the pastor of St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Beulah, which is in Benzie County up north.
Great pleasure to be on this call with you, Governor. Thank you so much for this time. And I just mailed my ballot in this morning, so I'm being very proud about that. And one of the things that I voted for was the education millage here. And I'm praying that that is going to go through. It's really needed here. So I'm wondering about education for the state, knowing it's funded next year, but how do you see that being funded going into the future?
So I know that you are nonpartisan, but I am not nonpartisan, and I will just share a couple of thoughts with you on that front. It is my fervent hope that we can get a fourth stimulus completed soon. And if not before the end of this year, it is my hope that perhaps with the new president, that will become a priority. Because what we have seen with COVID is it has really put a sharper point on how important these fundamentals are for people across our state. Our education system is underfunded and has been for a long time. In a distance learning environment, the disparities that have always been there have grown. One of the toughest decisions that I've made throughout COVID was to take our kids out of school, because I know that in a normal year, there is a big learning loss between the last day of school and one school year and the first day. So between June and September, a huge learning loss. But that loss is so much greater for kids in higher poverty. And I'm thinking about kids in Beulah, and I'm thinking about kids in Detroit, where there is higher poverty. That learning loss is always more profound. And so the budgets that I have written have been centered around the science that bears out that an equitable funding recognizes those inherent challenges in educating kids in higher poverty. And those are the budgets that I've introduced and that I've signed into law. It's not been exactly what I introduced, because I'm still trying to work with a legislature who maybe doesn't share all the same priorities that I do. But we have made strides in that front, but we need more resources. And I do believe that the gap that we normally have is so much greater because of COVID. And that's why the stimulus is so important, because our children are going to need wraparound services, whether it is simply the counseling and the health of our kids, but also I think about the PTSD, because we're all feeling this. Every one of us is stressed because of the challenges that we've been going through. I think about everyone from our nurses and doctors who've been inundated with so much tough stuff, the loss of life and the despair that people feel. But our kids are absorbing it too, and they're going to need wraparound long-term supports as well. So my hope is that we can do a lot more in this space. Education is at the center of everything that I'm passionate about. I have a grandfather who was a superintendent of Pontiac schools, and a grandmother who was a teacher, and a mom who was a teacher, and kids in the public schools. And it really, I think, is so essential to our homeland security and our economic future, as well as the individual needs of little people who need adults to deliver for them.
Thank you. And I will mention here, we have we'll talk about this in next steps, but we have a call like this coming up next week with Senator Peters. So we'll have a chance to address some of this federal level stuff with him for anybody that's interested in that. And we hope that folks will join us for that next week as well. but thank you for that, Governor. Our next question comes from Reverend Alfred Harris Sr., pastor of Saints of God Church in Flint.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Governor, for meeting with us and for putting our well-being as your primary concern. And also, I want to thank you for not being bullied by the man in the White House. My question is twofold. In light of the $600 million settlement being subject to legal fees, to what degree will that payment negatively affect the care of our children? And are there any state, federal, or private sector options to assist with the legal fees, consequently allowing more funds for direct long-term medical care?
Yeah, so Reverend Harris, I'm going to do my best to answer your question in a short amount of time, but I would also like the opportunity to have Dion and Gary Jones from my team follow up with you, so you've got a lot more information, because I know how personal this is. And one of the things that I like least about being the governor of Michigan is that I inherited a lot of lawsuits against my predecessor, and they continue on with my name as the defendant, even though they were initiated against the person that held this office before me. And moving forward to try to get some closure and justice for the people of Flint was something that was really important to me personally, just like the case around reading in Detroit was another example of that. And moving forward with the legislature who has to agree to pay the bill, you can only imagine all the different landmines that I've had to navigate here.
Yes.
But we really, working with the plaintiffs, felt like this was an opportunity to do some real good in a community that has suffered so much. This is one part of the work that we have done. We've been working closely with Mayor Weaver first, and now Mayor Neely, of course, in terms of a lot of the wraparound ongoing supports that are going to the city of Flint. And that's why I want to make sure you have all of that information. The negotiations in terms of the settlement have a reduced rate for the lawyers that have brought the cases. That was something that was a part of the mediation. The mediators were, one was a former judge and the other was Carl Levin, who I think we all know that name well. And we wanted to make sure that as much of the resources got to the families and the people of Flint. And so it's never going to be enough.
Right.
You can't compensate people for the kind of harm that was inflicted. But I think that with all the different pieces that are coming together, it really is a good, important step toward helping people get back on track and assisting. I know that Dr. Mona was really pleased to see it. I know she's someone that people look to in Flint, and I know there are a lot of leaders that are important, and that's why I want to make sure you as one of them have a full accounting of all of the different pieces that we're doing to help Flint in particular.
Thank you very much.
And we are lucky to have a good relationship with Dion from your team, and I assume
He's great.
it's okay if we share his contact info with people that want more information about this kind of stuff. He's been very helpful to us for a long time on things like this. Our next question is from Reverend Chad Parmalee. Reverend Parmalee is the lead pastor for Chapel Hill United Methodist Church in Battle Creek.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be included in this conversation. Governor Whitmer, I want to first thank you for your leadership through this crisis. You take a lot of heat, and an opportunity to say thank you is warranted. In a recent article on bridge.com, there are several quotes from a 2019 MISHDA report citing a shortage of affordable housing and barriers to homeownership in Michigan. I quote, "The supply of affordable homes for sale in Michigan is not meeting demand, and the share of Michigan citizens who own a home is falling as a result." A second quote is, "Homeownership continues to be a goal of many Michigan residents, but the pathways to achieving this goal are becoming more difficult." And the last quote, "The upward pricing trend is one of the most significant barriers to entry for households across the state." These realities disproportionately affect the lower middle income and ALICE populations, as well as continue to limit access to homeownership to those who have been socially and systemically restricted to the same. What are some of the strategies your administration is implementing to address these problems?
I appreciate the question. We recognize that, especially right now, we're trying to help keep people in their homes. We know that COVID has created all sorts of additional challenges to the ones that you just cited in terms of keeping people safe and ensuring that people have this important path to, to a good life. You got to have a home that you can afford, that is healthy, that is not going to make you sick, and is not going to get you out. It is not going to deal with a landlord who could be capricious or vindictive, or so this is something that's an important part of the work that we're doing in terms of pulling people out of poverty. And I appreciate your stating the ALICE details and data, because I think that that is such an important measurement. 40% of our state is under the ALICE threshold. It's 2 out of every 5 families that are unable to meet the daily needs of the people in their homes, if they are lucky enough to have homes, as you pointed out. So some of the work that we're doing in MISHDA is getting more of the resources out into promulgating and spurring the building of affordable housing. I know that whether it's in Traverse City or it is in Grand Rapids, that this is an issue that plagues communities all across Michigan. And so it was, I think, an opportunity to improve upon where we were in the last administration, where there was a lot of administrative expense that was coming at the cost of getting resources into actually building houses and building independent places for people to live. So I think we're making some strides there. I'll just be very candid, I was in a position where I could put a cabinet in the vast majority of positions in state government. There are some that are determined by commission, and MISHDA is one of them. So it's taken me a little bit longer to get people in these positions that share the values that I brought into office. It's kind of how government's designed, and we can talk at greater length if we think that's wise or not, but it's certainly created some obstacles as I've wanted to move rapidly in this space. So we are finalizing a new director for the department. We're in the final stages of that. And I think that that's going to give us another opportunity to do a lot more with a new leader in that agency.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. And I'm seeing Deanna is texting me that you are being called to an emergency meeting. We do really appreciate the time that you've taken with us today. We certainly hope that this is the beginning of a longer term relationship with our group and with clergy all over Michigan. If you have any last remarks before you need to jet,
I do, and I'll keep it brief. The emergency meeting I'm going to is there's already breaking news about what has been happening, and throughout COVID, it's been a tough time for every one of us. When the president set his sights on me and didn't denounce white supremacy groups and has given space to militia groups, there's a cost to that. And some of it's been directed at me, and that's a part of the emergency that I'm being called to. It's breaking in the news now. You'll know more about it in the next hour or two. But to the extent that each of you can use your platforms and can speak out against hate and violence and white supremacy, I hope and encourage you to do that, because I do think we all need to be in that fight together. And so I just appreciate your leadership and your time and your friendship, and I look forward to staying in close contact. And Deanna is fantastic, and I'm glad that you have built a good relationship with him. Please don't hesitate to reach out when you think we need to connect, because that's important to me too. And I appreciate your prayers and support as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Governor. We hope to meet with you again soon. Deanne just texted me, maybe sometime post-election. We'd love to follow up with you, and yeah, hopefully this can be a productive relationship for all of us moving forward.
And we're praying for you.
And we are.
Thank
And we are
Thank
praying for you.
Amen.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Oh.